2000s, proliterin was called, although still a controversy. In this particular example here, it was done within this lab itself, where an AFL player was asked to respond to a scenario displayed on this exact screen you see here. When I say you just run through the ball and kick it as fast as you can, try to break the record. Okay. Student doing my research in tennis biomechanics, and most of my time spent within this lab or on the tennis court. So for today, I'll be sharing with you a bit more about what we do here within the lab. Again, this is the Sports Biomechanics lab. We have another lab, the clinical gate lab, in the other building, just under where the exercise physiology lab would be later on. So within this lab, it's a very big space. It allows us to capture quite a bit of dynamic movements across a variety of different sports. We've got AFL players coming here, kicking the ball out. We've got javelin throwers, tennis players, cricketers. We even had artists from Cirque du Soleil come here. We hung the silk from above, and we actually measured what they're looking at and how they move throughout the movement. These cameras that you see around here that's been set up are infrared cameras. They're specialized cameras used for 3D motion capture or analysis. These cameras you might have seen in movie when it comes to animations. If you've watched Shrek or any CGI, essentially, they make use of these cameras as well. They stick retroreflective markers on the actors, or in our case, athletes. And with the space being calibrated, it allows us to capture these markers on the participant or athlete in 3 dimensions. In most cases, when we go on the field, coaches, referees, they only see movements in 1 dimension, which is the perspective they're looking at. And sometimes this doesn't allow them to see the whole movement in itself. And with 3D motion capture, it allows us to then assess movement, understand then whether it's to improve performance or to reduce injury risk. Okay, so I don't want to talk too much. I've got an activity here which involves someone kicking a ball. Would anybody like to kick the ball? Before I begin even. What do you think is the fastest ball speed recorded in soccer or football in history? Anyone want to guess? The fastest recorded soccer kick is 210 kilometers per hour or 58.3 meters per second. So today we'll see if you are able to break that record. Give me 1 second. Alright, sorry, what's your name? Ollie. Yeah. Okay. I'll take orange shoes. I'll get you without yeah, so as I mentioned, we need to have these markers stuck on Ollie's foot in order to measure the speed of a foot movement. Using the principles of conservation of momentum, you've seen these toys where 5 balls are strung on a string. You pull one of the ball on one side, you release it, and then as it hits the rest of the balls, the ball on the other end comes out at the same velocity or the same magnitude. In this same example, we're going to stick this marker on Ollie's foot, and using the principles of conservation of momentum, we are assuming that the speed in which a foot moves to contact the ball will be the same speed that the ball will eventually be there. It's a proxy, right? Okay, I'm just going to stick this to your right or left.
Oh, right.
Alright, if you were to just step into the space, so then you can see Ollie's foot essentially is these 3 markers over here. If he moves around, you'll be able to see it move. Ollie, I'll let you just take a few you're moving through this space, again, because when measuring in 3 dimensions, what we're really interested in is the speed of the ball moving forward. So if I click on just one of these markers on the foot, we're looking at the forward direction. At the point of impact, you'll see this ball start moving. Ball is got a 12.5 meters per second, just about 1/3 slope of the speed of the fastest kick. So that's fine. All the skill that was acquired across these many years of training probably not into that. Okay. So here's biomechanics. What exactly do we study? Biomechanics really is the study of mechanics and neuromuscular control of movement in living organisms. We say living organisms because apart from humans that we study within this space, across the years there have also been other living organisms, be it rabbits, kangaroos, ostriches, even lizards that have crawled through this space. And what we really want to know is how they move and what causes them to be able to move in the way that they do. Now, there are a few different fields of biomechanics that we do here within the biomechanics lab in UWA. Mainly, of course, sport and exercise, which is the crux of what we do here. But also, as mentioned, we've got the clinical biomechanics lab where we can do clinical studies, lifespan development, looking at kids as they progress through adulthood, as well as occupational ergonomics. We're looking at sport and exercise. In sport and exercise, the goal of biomechanics really is, of course, to study movement, but with the goal of improving performance, reducing injury risk as well. But of course, with technology, with refereeing, some of the work that we do also involves the legality of movements, whether a movement is considered a foul, whether it's performed appropriately or not. So how many of you play cricket, know about cricket? Huge sport here in Australia. Yep. So in the early 2000s, Run was called, although still a controversy in terms of its bowling action. For those who don't know, bowling action requires the athlete essentially from the point at which the ball starts at the back of the movement, all the way to the point of release, they've got to keep their arms straight, so you cannot extend your arm, because once you extend your arm, it constitutes a throw rather than a bowl. But if I get anyone to straighten out their arm, you will probably be able to straighten it, keep it straight, look at it from all angles, and it will be straight, right? From the front, from the side, this is what it looks like. But with different people, you've got different anatomical structures. With Moran, when he was asked to straighten his arm was actually a bit bent. At its straightened point, it was a bit bent, and it wasn't fully straight. When officials looked at the bowling movement, they initially called it a foul because it looked like when he went through the range of motion, although it was as straight as he could make it, across the movement from different perspectives, this might seem like it's a throw because at one point it's bent, but at some point it looks like it's straight. We were able to using this technology, we were able to assess if the call was actually accurate or not. Because again, like I mentioned, if you look at one movement from one perspective, you might not be able to tell if the arm was extending. But with 3D motion capture, throughout the range of motion, as you see this 3D images, you can see that while one perspective shows that the arm looks like it's straightening, from another perspective, actually it still remains bent. Right? So again, with motion capture or 3D motion capture, it allows us to be able to analyze these movements in 3 dimensions, which is something that coaches or officials would not be able to normally see. And then with that, it then rules out the ruling that he actually drew with the video movement. A lot of this work is done in the lab initially, which makes it a bit hard for us to then assess how performance is done on court. A lot of in the wild capture architecture, as they call it now, is more important essentially because when you perform in a lab setting, the conditions are slightly different from in competition, which makes it a bit less accurate. So with development of technology and advancements in these technologies, there are smaller units that you can attach to your body called inertial measurement units. You attach them to your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, essentially throughout the body, and you will be able to study this 3D motion of an athlete even outside on the court. Some of these, because they track as a proxy of what we would be able to do here, we actually bring them into the lab, bring the device into the lab and validate them based on the gold standard as we have here before we bring it out onto the field. These devices are used essentially for whether it's movement tracking or monitoring. So a classic example is when Andy Murray, one of the top tennis players, was coming back from injuries, he would put 2 of these on his ankles in order to track how much load he was actually experiencing throughout the training session as he came back. Because if you would have planned a return to sport, probably you would then know how much load you want to experience as you come back without overloading too quickly. As mentioned, we also do clinical biomechanics. Again, here it's a bit more in terms of sports. We look at non-contact ACL injuries here. Number 32, as you perform that side step, essentially nobody contacted him, but he still sustained an ACL injury, of which 70% of non-contact of ACL injuries are non-contact. Because of the fact that it's non-contact, it means that we would be able to assess the movement of the player as they perform the side step maneuver itself. So as mentioned, apart from improving performance to see how quickly someone can side step, we also want to look at injury risk reductions. When someone performs a side step, how much load actually goes through the knees, which might end up rupturing the ACL or not. As we look at technique, for example, someone who does a wide step before they perform a side step might be able to do a much sharper cut, but essentially puts a lot more strain on their ACLs as well. So using this technology, we are able to first assess how someone's doing a maneuver, whether it's a side step or a jump landing. And from there, once we have assessed it, we can then try to make changes through an intervention to make it maybe less injurious. In some of the research, it's shown, or some of the research that has been done here, it's been shown that if you were to side step with your step slightly closer to your center of mass versus a bit wider, it does reduce your injury risk for non-contact ACLs by quite a lot. Of course, coming back from the injury as well, we can monitor how much load is placed on the knees prior to and after surgery in order to make further adjustments to the technique. This concept of perception action coupling is interesting, where a lot of times what we see results in what we end up doing. So in this particular example here, it was done within this lab itself, where an AFL player was asked to respond to a scenario displayed on this exact screen you see here, in which as they perform the movement on this force plate, which is essentially a very expensive weighing scale, it measures forces like you would in a weighing scale of vertical forces, but also forward, backwards, and left and right forces, because those are forces that essentially cause an ACL to rupture. Right, so as the person or the athlete moves through the space, reacts to defenders moving, we wanted to see how he would perform the side step, but also on top of that, with the eye tracker device that he's wearing, as you see on the right side here, this is essentially showing what he's looking at that point in time when he performed the side step. While biomechanically there was not much difference in terms of the loading on the knee, it was shown that between amateurs and professionals actually do not look at where the defenders are, they look at where open spaces are. So by being able to understand where experts actually look at, we're able to then inform coaches on what we should get amateurs to look at in order to perform the skill better. Again, in clinical biomechanics, we have worked with children with cerebral palsy condition in which your muscles are constantly contracted, so it's very tight, affects the gait of movement of the child. With this technology, we are able to assess the gait or walking stance of these children with cerebral palsy, and then liaising or working with surgeons, we can then provide an informed, we can help them make an informed decision of what kind of surgeries that kid needs to go through in order to correct that gait movement. Previously, without this technology, a lot of surgeons would look at the kid walk, assess through that one perspective, and decide, okay, from how the kid's walking, we might need to do this surgery. They do the surgery, 1 year later they come back, and then they see how the child has changed in their walking pattern, and then decide, okay, maybe we need this other surgery as well, or this other surgery. So rather than going through this, what they call birthday surgeries, we would be able to use this technology, capture them moving one time, and then make a much more informed decision on how many surgeries they might be able to do at one go. Another concept known as associative motor control. We also use MRIs to study how the brain controls movement. Using MRI again, for kids mostly, when you ask kids to raise both hands and you ask them to tap each finger against the thumb, say you ask them to do it in the left hand, some of them will also do it in the right hand. So the ability to use MRI with biomechanics allows us to study how the brain controls movement on top of what we talked about with perception. The last one really is innovation. In biomechanics, a lot of our analysis involves tools that are constantly evolving. With the advent or the rapid advancement in technology and machine learning, computer vision, we get a lot of big data. So with all this big data that has been captured across the years, across research, we are able to make use of what they have from vision. So take example, across I think 25 years of research here in UWA, they have been capturing a lot of people doing sidestepping, and they've got all these data that actually are gold standard measures of forces. They've got videos of these people doing these movements. Once you can pair video or computer vision technology with the data that you capture, you essentially can use videos to predict how much forces go through the knees without having to use these expensive force plates. Similarly, once you train a machine learning model to be able to detect or predict these forces, for spectators, as you watch on the screen, as you watch a player perform a particular maneuver, whether it's a side step, you would then be able, through the video, to predict how much forces might go through their limbs. You might be able to predict what kinds of injury risks they might have as they're performing it in real time. The bottom example is more prevalent in recent times, especially when COVID hit, or if you see patients that might be staying very far away and don't have easy access to doctors. With computer vision, again, whether you're using your phone, you might film yourself using a camera and an app that will be able to sort of calculate the angles of joint movement. A physio might be able to prescribe exercises for a patient and actually measure them on the spot as they're performing the exercises. So it allows us to quantify and provide more better quality of interventions to patients. Okay, the last thing I'll leave with is, in terms of baseball, how many of you have played or heard of baseball before? It's very similar to a lot of sports, right? What's the fastest baseball pitch in history again? Close. It's 108 miles per hour by Nolan Ryan. More than 50 years ago, and even through the 0.38 seconds from the ball release up to the point at which contact is made on the bat. In that amount of time, the batter needs to react to the ball, decide or rather identify what kind of ball is being thrown, whether it's a curveball, a fastball, decide if they want to hit the ball, and then essentially execute the movement to make contact. This scenario doesn't happen very often because you don't always get Nolan Ryan throwing a ball at you at that speed. But with technology, as you've seen earlier, on how we can recreate scenarios, replay them, have eye trackers, have these motion capture systems, we can essentially replicate these conditions and allow players to train in these conditions repetitively. I say repetitively because Nolan Ryan probably couldn't throw every single ball at 170 kilometers per hour anyway. Okay, so this is from a batter's perspective. From a pitcher's perspective, how does a pitcher actually pitch such a fast ball? A lot of this comes from the concept of a stretch shortening cycle. So if you look at the image on the top right, you see how the pitcher is able to get his shoulder in such a huge shoulder external rotation range. And in this very, very, very rapid movement from when he gets into maximal external shoulder rotation till the ball release, he makes use of this stretch shortening cycle, which is really like a rubber band. When you pull a rubber band and you release it quickly, it flies a lot further than if you leave a rubber band unstretched. Right, so similarly, the stretch shortening cycle, which is really used in a lot of sporting movements to create speed, is one of the key concepts in which we try to train within the biomechanics lab. Okay, that's about everything I have for you. We have introduced just a few of the equipment that we use. We do have a few others, whether it's like a biodeck, so if you come in a bit closer, you see the torture chair over there. That's where we strap some athletes in. We get them to exert maximum force in whatever movement it is, might be a knee extension, knee flexion, like mesh forces. We've got that capture area behind the curtains. That is a many camera, what do you call it? Photogrammetry rig. Essentially, in a single snap, all cameras, I think about 120 of them, would snap and capture the hull, or as they call it, or the surface area of athletes in 3 dimensions. With that image, we can adjust the postures of these players as they move through, whether it's water or air. So for a swimmer, for example, we might get them in there, and we get them to hold a streamline position, and then we can adjust these movements and understand the hydrodynamics as they move through the water. That's about everything really I have for you. If there are any questions that you might have on biomechanics, please feel free to take and ask, but otherwise, I think you might just, you can wait here, but you might just be going to the exercise physiology lab later. Thank you. Thank you.